treat for you guys today. I have the CEO of Super Copper on the line. If you guys saw my thesis that went out a few weeks ago on Super Copper, which is one of my favorite copper, gold, silver plays going forward for this year, we're going to be kind of going over a couple different questions that I have for them. But do check that thesis out, guys. It is linked in the description of the video below. And let's just quickly take a look at the chart. What's been going on the copper side? Obviously, we see copper near all-time highs. Super Copper, nice continuation push off the lows. It's been grinding higher for quite some time. Obviously we went out and we saw a nice little push to that 125 area on the US OTC side, Canadian side into the 137, 140 area. And we do have copper still kind of pushing all-time highs. So I wanted to bring Zach on. Zach Dolesky, the CEO of Super Copper, to ask him a few questions. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good to see you.
So, Zach, I wanted to ask you a few things, and I wanted you to walk me through, if you can, the significance of the recent, bonanza grade gold and copper discovery at the Castillo project, including those standout assays of 53.8 grams per ton, which is, extremely high grade, and 17.7% copper. What does this mean for Super Copper and your overall strategy?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So we have two main projects, both in Chile, Atacama, and Chile is the #1 producer of copper in the world. And they also just got a new president-elect, Jose Antonio Cast, who's very pro-mining, pro-business, and all pro-USA. So we put out results from one of our projects, the Castillo project, and this was the first work we had ever done on the property since we acquired it. And then we also added some more land to make a really strong package. And the results we got, as you mentioned, and as the market saw, were much better than expected, even better than we expected, because frankly, that was the first commercial process we had ran over the property. And the main takeaway is we're getting very high grades, but we're also getting a lot of scale and a lot of structure. And what that means is it's not just one-off samples. We're talking a very high hit rate. Over 25% of the samples got over 1 gram a ton of gold. Very significant copper grades, up to 17%. The average mine produces at around 0.5% to 0.7%. So to get those type of grades on surface is very rare, and a very nice trend. So it's going in this vertical south to north trend over the property. And you can see these strike lengths being sort of 500, 700 meters plus in length. So I think it's just a really exciting time that one of the projects that we own 100% of with no royalties, it's all under our control. We have very significant success. And in terms of the type of deposit, it's looking like an IOCG. So what that means is an iron oxide copper gold deposit, which is one of the most profitable types of deposits you can get. And also, this region that we're in hosts one of the biggest IOCGs in the world. So about 40 minutes drive north of our property, you have Lundin's Candelaria, which is one of the biggest mines in the world. Just overall, really good news and better than we expected.
Beautiful. So, with the regulatory approval of the CUPR projects now in place, what are the next key steps for the exploration pipeline there? And how do you plan to prioritize drilling across the Atacama assets as well?
So we have now full exploitation rights on our second project. So we just talked about Castillo. Now I'll talk about Cordillera, which you mentioned. So we have full drilling permits now in terms of the approvals. So we can pretty much start imminently. And what we're waiting for is a pretty important milestone, and that's all our geophysics. So in the same period, we completed work on Castillo, which was last quarter. We also completed work on Cordillera, and all those results are just being processed right now. So in the next few weeks, we'll be announcing all those results in terms of what it's looking like underneath the surface, potentially. And specifically, that means induced polarization and ground magnometry, basically the geophysics around the property, and that will help us finalize our drill target. So we're going into a phase now where we're about to announce all the results from that northern project, and then the plan is basically go right into drilling.
Gotcha. So you've obviously, one thing I want to talk about as well is the team. You've assembled a strong team, experts such as Mark Gibson from Ivanhoe Electric. How does this leadership experience position Super Copper to capitalize on opportunities in Chile's copper belt?
Yeah, I would say that we have every piece of the puzzle basically filled now from a corporate perspective. And Mark Gibson, who you mentioned, he was the chief operating officer of Ivanhoe Electric. He was also the chief geophysics officer, and he joins us as a lead technical advisor. And what that means is that now we're getting all the geophysics from our northern project. We've got one of the best minds in the whole world when it comes to geophysics to analyze it and help us make sure we're drilling in the right direction and location. Alongside that, our lead geo, Mike Dufresne, he owns and co-founded Apex Geoscience, which is one of the most prominent geophysics firm or geoscience firms in the world with over 30 years of experience in the space. And comes to a corporate and also a political level in the region of Chile. So we're starting to increase our exposure there, and that's really starting to help with inbound, also accelerating things with our existing projects.
Awesome. And let's talk a little bit about the macroeconomics. Obviously, we spoke about it at the beginning here, but given the macroeconomic tailwinds for copper, such as, projected supply deficits and demand from electrification of AI, rebuilding, of the infrastructure, how is Super Copper uniquely positioned to benefit from these trends?
Yeah, I think when you look at the trends, it's just a very fundamental supply demand situation, but people don't really understand the structural tightness. Like you look at some of the mines that are existing today, they're coming down in terms of head grades. So big mines that used to be doing 1-2% average copper processing, they're now down to 0.5%. And then you have mines from the fact that they've been operating for a long period of time. They're going deeper and deeper underground. They're starting to come offline from issues like we saw in the Grasberg mine recently, which was one of the biggest mines. It got taken offline. That type of supply, it's only about 1% or 2% of the total supply. However, we saw the impact in the actual market of the copper price start to skyrocket after that, relatively speaking, because it's actually so tight structurally. And then you add on top of that, initiatives like the U.S. government just announced the Vault initiative, where they've designated, stockpiling of critical minerals, of which copper is included in that. You're now getting a tighter and tighter market. The element with AI data centers, it is very interesting. So AI data centers use a lot more copper, and they have a lot more power density than traditional power centers or traditional data centers. And further to that, there's also a bigger usage of copper in all the elements that go into a data center. So it's not just the facility. You have the bus bars, you have the transmission lines, you have the power input, output, everything related to the grid there. And, mentally, it's funny as well. You look at something like the NVIDIA GB200 chip, which is one of the new AI data chips, that chip itself, it's using about 2 miles of copper within one of its cabinets. So the actual use is very serious in terms of a line item for these facilities. And although the data centers themselves are a bit of a smaller percentage of the overall copper consumption worldwide, their growth is very material. And specifically, the projections are about 30 times over the next 10 years in terms of the power demand from AI data centers. So you kind of look at these things on all these levels, and then you come back to supply, where you literally, cannot increase the supply easily. It's not like an oil field where you can add another drill in 8 months, you have more supply. It's a 10, 15-year process, which requires, exploration, discovery, permitting, development, et cetera. And from our position, we're trying to hit it at multiple angles, specifically at the earlier stage. But we're also working with material science in terms of increasing potential supply as well, and building up more projects. So I think from our position, we're definitely at the highest torque perspective, but now our projects are showing, the most exciting fundamental results that they've ever shown. So, I think we're very uniquely positioned to, be a bit of a player in this space.
It's awesome to hear. And let's talk about, I mean, obviously we're at the beginning of the year here, but looking ahead to 2026, what are the major catalysts that investors should watch for from you guys? And what do you believe Super Copper represents as a asymmetric opportunity in the junior mining space?
Yeah, I would break it down almost like a sum of the parts analysis. And you would basically look at the company in 3 main assets right now, maybe 4. We have our Castillo project, where we just announced results from. We have our Cordillera project, and then we have material science. So from Castilla, we're going to do all the geophysics and really delineate this target, which we have, and then go into drilling. You can look at some of our neighbors, they're in the range of $150 million valuation plus up to the multi-billion. And the net asset values can get quite substantial based on what we have. So we're going to do that work imminently and see the results. In terms of Cordillera, we've got geophysics in the next few weeks here. All the results from our last program, which will be, quite extensive. It's the most extensive program we've ever done. And then going straight into drilling on that project. So a couple catalysts there. And then on the material science side, that's a little bit in the background, but I think that will be a bit of a dark horse as we start to, get closer to bringing a product to market and putting some more exposure on that over the back half of sort of Q2 this year. So I think overall it's just going to be nonstop over the next couple of months, and each of these catalysts are quite significant in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting stuff. Looking forward to seeing what these pipeline has to hold going forward and more results, etc. Guys, Super Copper, check it out. Check out the thesis that we did write on it a couple of weeks ago. The chart, we got some bullish consolidation here. I think it's a perfect time if you guys are looking at an idea that makes sense in the copper space. This is one of my favorites at the moment right now. So take a look at it. And if you guys do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Spartan@spartantrading.com. Zach, again, thanks for joining us. Cheers, buddy.
Thanks for having me. See you, brother. Ciao.
Yeah.